Coaching in Session.
Your exclusive destination for unparalleled personal and professional growth.
With your host, MichaelRearden.
Whether you choose to live within limits or break free, your mindset journey begins here.
There are philosophical questions that sometimes can bring about the best types of mindsets in your life and in the world. Because when I think about the mindset of can rules be broken, or should rules be broken, or rules are meant to be broken, all of them are going to bring about a different connotation to what it does to the mind. And I think about how this question is really breaking our brain or breaking the cycle from the limits that most of us are living in. And when I'm looking at like our idea of this rule, right? It can be because of our schooling, our parents, right? Those rules that have been instilled. And sometimes those expectations, those rules that happen can be for the safety of someone, the protection, or maybe just so a mom or dad doesn't go insane dealing with a 3-year-old. And I can say that because I have a 3-year-old that's literally doing all of these things and I have a choice to make. I can say, good job breaking the rules and pushing the threads of life. Or I can say, hey, let's slow down. Let's do the right thing so I'm not getting stressed out. So mom's not getting stressed out, where you're touching things you're not supposed to be doing and creating all of these limits and factors that he's going to have to break through or free from at one point in his life. Or I can just say, you know what? I'm going to allow him to be free as long as he's being safe. But then again, what does safe mean? Does safe mean comfort? Does safe mean that you are just allowing your circumstance to guide you to where you want to be? You're not taking, healthy and measurable risks. I don't know when it comes to your life or maybe your children's life. But what I can tell you is the more limits you put on yourself or someone else, those limits are going to permeate into your life and into your mind. So there's a psychology that follows with breaking the rules. And this is why when you're a teenager, you feel as if you're empowered. You feel like you can do anything, and yet you don't know anything. You have this ego of, I can do whatever, I'll be fine, I'm self-sustainable, whatever. Before you know it, you're like, oh, wait, the real world is harsh. It's tough. I didn't know how stressful this was. Well, you were breaking the rules at the time, and it felt good. It feels good to break free from the bonds. Imagine a slave, for example, finally getting the handcuffs or the shackles lifted from their feet. They can move freely. What if we did that to the mind? What if we opened the cage for the bird and the bird flew away and it finally had an opportunity to spread its wings and fly in the sky and feel the wind? That could be life. So we understand that we are living in these boxes. We're living in these circumstances where we're just allowing these rules that we set for ourselves to inhibit what life truly is, abundant. I think about how everyone has this potential for growth. But then again, sometimes if they grow too fast, there can be some type of conundrum or some chaos that ensues. We think of growing pains when a teenager is growing through a growth spurt. And they're like, oh, my back hurts or things are sore because you're growing so quickly. Same thing can happen when you get your 15 minutes of fame, where you do something and you're this huge celebrity. And then all of a sudden you have all these eyes on you and you're like, I thought I would have liked this, but it's not necessarily so much fun. I have talked about this on the podcast before, how you can be doing something that you might consider mundane today, like going to the grocery store, and then all of a sudden you can't go to the grocery store because you're too famous. Should you have ever became famous? Or can we just say, you know what? It's okay that I'm famous. I'm still going to go grocery shop and I'm going to break the rules of the stigmas of me not going out. But then again, are you going to deal with the photos? Are you going to deal with the backlash? Are you going to deal with the cancellations of all your supporters? And you're saying no pictures, no pictures. I mean, it's going to be two types of people when it comes to that type of living or that type of stardom. When we're looking at what rules are in general, rules can be laws, rules can be standards, it can be expectations, as I talked about. And the idea for rules is that they're supposed to keep us safe. And safe is one of the things where it's a word that feels nice, but I would rather be unsafe if I'm pushing for something better. If I am, let's say, on the treadmill or something, I might be pushing myself beyond safe measures, right? But maybe my body is already primed for those measures because my safe measure might be your unsafe measure. So what happens sometimes when people they instill rules on you, they say, "Oh, this is unsafe," because you're putting themselves into your shoes or my shoes, where just because you can't do it doesn't mean I can't do it. And I've talked about this quite a bit, especially in the beginning of the podcast and the business, where there's so many people who will be naysayers. There'll be people who say that you can't do something. They'll say you have to follow the rules, you have to follow the systems. And with these rules and these systems are being defeated every single day. I think of the people who wanted to achieve success in their life. And I'm talking about crazy success, right? We think of the Wright brothers and how they want to make these flying aircrafts, and everyone is looking at these crazy guys like, what are these guys doing? They want to fly in the sky. We're not birds. We don't have wings. Humans were not meant to fly. And look at where we are today. We're going to the moon. We're going to Mars. We're just hanging out in space for fun. We've come a long way. I think of people who have created the automobiles and how we once came from a horse and buggy, and we're always going to have a horse and buggy, and this is going to be the means of traveling, and it's going to take this long to get to A and B or whatever it be. And it's one of those things that transforms, but it takes a mind that can expand itself before things come into reality, right? The vision has to be there. I remember there was one scientist or one inventor when they were talking about this idea for cell phone waves, where everyone is going to be able to wirelessly connect to the internet or connect to people from all around the world. And everyone says, and they have landlines maybe at this time, they say, "You're crazy. This will never happen." And sure enough, look at what we have today. We have satellites in the sky that we can see someone's home from millions of miles away or hundreds of thousands of miles away. And we have to ask ourselves, well, where is this technology coming from? And how are we using it? Well, most of this technology is going to be surface level of how we use it. Most people, they want to be entertained. Most people, they just want to get some quick information. Most people don't necessarily look at their own personal development or their own story of how they can progress in life as something as their prime focus for using technology. But then again, you can listen to this podcast for free. You can watch us on YouTube, motivational videos, and you can get what you need. But how many people are doing it? How many people are breaking the rules of what society says and allots for them? Not many. So I'm going to be talking to the rule breakers right now, the people who have looked at the rules. And I'm not talking about the people who see the speed limit at 60 and they say, "I'm going to go 65 or I'm going to go 80 and I'm going to be reckless," because there's a difference between being reckless and breaking the rules. But then again, sometimes you have to be reckless in order to grow in your life. How do you differentiate between the two? What is the difference? Well, when I look at this idea of breaking the rules, I believe there's some level of responsibility that has to be present. Because if I'm going to be speeding, I know that's not responsible. I know that it's not going to benefit me if I get in a car crash or if I crash into someone else. I know that even if I went at a certain pace, I would get to my goal. Everyone is so quick to be in a rush. And I'm not saying that I don't speed or that people don't speed or that people don't have road rage. This idea of a speedometer or the speed limit is a rule. Yes, it's a law. But then again, it's a limit. So when we look at these limits of what we can and what we can't do, I'm not saying that we should go out and break the law and be all of these godfathers and selling all these drugs to everyone. That's not what I'm talking about. Or having these mutinies and rebelling against the government. This idea is there are going to be things that we can do and things that we can't do. When it comes to a felony or a misdemeanor, if you want to do something along those lines, that's a personal choice. You have to be able to differentiate between, are you breaking the rules or are you pushing the limits? And I can think about a bunch of situations about how you might feel restricted because of rules, where maybe they say you can't go out. This happened with the pandemic, right? They said you can't go out and be outside, right? And it makes no sense, right? You can't be outside and to your mailbox. Why are you outside? You're not supposed to be inside. Everyone's quarantined inside their house. Okay, sure, right? But then again, you have the rule breakers. You have people who go out not wearing the mask and things along those lines. People just wanting to keep on living their life, right? Those people broke the rules. People who didn't get the vaccines. And then, of course, those rule breakers eventually came to this idea of that it was good to break the rules. It was good to go against the system. And this is not to say that you should be afraid of your government or you should be afraid about what people think or what people say or do to you. This is all this idea of how free do you feel? What are your rules that you want to break today? But then again, rules can be a good and powerful thing. Maybe you can just call rules expectations. I have some rules. For example, I don't get a tattoo, right? It's an expectation. It's a rule that I have, right? It's something I created when I was younger. But then again, I understand the moment I start to relinquish the things that I said when I was younger that have no significance in my adult life, I'm going to start, I guess you can say, opening up the dam or the waterfall for all the other things that possibly can go wrong. So I've set a foundation for rules, for a set of foundation for limits in my life, not because they're going to limit me, but because those things don't bring about anything good in my life. Because what if I said, you know what? I'm going to get a bunch of cars. I'm going to get a bunch of homes that I'm not even going to be living in. I'm going to waste a bunch of money on things I don't even need. A bunch of clothes, shoes, and all this stuff. I'm not going to use it, but I'm going to spend all this money on it. When I was young, I said, yeah, I'm not going to be doing that, right? So I created a limit. But then I look back at that limit and I say, that's an appropriate limit. That's a limit that's not going to be destructive to me in the long run. It's not going to limit me because I can even give myself a mindset of the alternative and saying, hey, I can't buy all these cars. I can't buy all these clothes. I guess I can't be successful. So now I just basically told myself that materialism is going to be my success. If I can buy the things that I want or desire in my life, then I'm successful. Well, when I created those rules for myself, maybe internally I knew something where I knew that one day I might get to the point where I can buy anything I want, but I don't buy anything I want because I understand that it's not going to bring about any level of happiness in my life. The rules that I created, maybe limits for someone else, are guideposts for me. So the guideposts are going to be what you can do and how you can apply things in your life. Now, when we think of breaking the rules, sometimes when you break the rules, you feel empowered because you're doing it. Where you say, whoa, I did something wrong, but that wrong might feel right. And there's going to be two aspects to it. Wrong because it is wrong, and then this idea of it was wrong, but it feels so right. Now, when we're doing this, we have to have a clean conscience. We have to have a moral compass. We have to have all our humanity intact. It's like how you're not going to just go to a baby and harm a baby, right? Naturally, hey, this baby's defenseless. I'm not going to harm this baby. But then again, there's some crazy people who do that. So they're breaking the rules, they're breaking the law. But then at some point you say, hey, this is not going to empower me. This is not going to make me feel any better. But then again, just because it happens for some people, it doesn't mean it's going to be necessary for you. So think about just applying what you want in your life to all regards and to all aspects. And when we're looking at how you apply it to your life, the rule breaking aspect is you do it in a way that's systematic. You don't just do it in a way that's frivolous to what the world's rules are, because the world is going to give you rules every single day. They're going to say what you can and what you can't do. But when's the last time that you made rules for yourself, or you looked at your limits in your life and you asked, is this against the law? Is it against the law to dream? Is it against the law to be more than I am today? Is it against the law to be wealthy and successful and to have a happy family and marriage? No, it's not. But we allow those limits and those rules of what society's saying or what's trending at the point in time to dictate what is for us. So we can break those rules readily. We can break those mindsets every single day. But most people, what happens is they fall victim to it. And what happens when they fall victim to it is they say, well, it is what it is. This is what allotted for me. I had it coming for me. Because most people, they're just in a steady decline. And I've talked about the steady decline where they're just gradually going downhill. They're not making any progress. But then again, you can look at your limits. You can look at your rules. You can look at the walls. You can look at the locked doors in your life, and you can get a sledgehammer. You can break everything down. So the scaffolding that you're trying to build this perfect life, is it your perfect life or is someone else's perfect life? Where's the rule in that? Because there is going to be a set of rules that society is going to give you of what you should be moving toward or what you should be attaining. But then again, are those rules meant for you? Because maybe you don't want a White House. Maybe you want a castle. Maybe you don't want a picket fence. Maybe you want a moat. So because you want to live in medieval times, you're living life wrong? No, I want you to be a rule breaker. I want you to live near a castle. I want you to get a princess, and I want you to be the king of your life, of what is possible. So yeah, rules can be a good thing. Rules can keep you safe. They can protect you. But then again, should you be breaking the rules consistently? And I believe that the rules that are governed by society that are not law should be broken because those rules only bring about limits. They don't bring about any level of growth in your life. Most people who live within these rules have a fixed mindset. Most people are living in this smaller version of themselves because they are not daring greatly. There's so many books about this idea of dare. Go out and get yours, right? This idea of power and purpose. I understand it's going to be difficult. I understand it's difficult to be the person who's the crazy bag person, the homeless person on the street, right? They're doing something different. We want to be in some level, some realm, in the same picture as everyone else. We want to be a member of society. We have to maybe be crazy at some point. We have to have an imagination that is going to rival even the craziest people in the world. And I'm not talking about the crazy people who are going in psychiatric spots. I'm talking about the crazy people who have dreams. I'm talking about the people who have these ideas that might seem impossible today. And it might seem so far-fetched. But then again, all of these wonderful businesses that are thriving today are coming from this idea of what people never thought about, or maybe what people thought about and never brought to life. I can't tell you how many people that come to me saying, hey, I had the idea for Uber. Hey, I had the idea for Amazon. Hey, I had the idea for X, Y, and Z company. And I say, well, why did you not create it? They didn't break the rules. They follow in line. Sometimes when you're lining up for school, you don't necessarily know what type of limits you're being given. Because what if you broke the rule right then and there? And you say, I'm going in the front of the line. I'm going to be the first student into the school. All of these ideas, it might seem insignificant, but gradually those chains, they begin to form. The vines begin to entangle you. They entrap you. Think of a garden, for example, or just a vine patch. Those vines don't just magically grab onto things. It takes some time. And if you don't move those vines, they get a hold of you. So you have to move. You have to be deliberate. And sometimes breaking the rules, you have to be deliberate in doing it. Now, like I said, of course, there's going to be different types of rules that you can break. I believe an easy way to differentiate between the two is a rule and a law. Depending on where you live, is going to be giving you some level of your freedoms, of your level of action. There are certain countries that don't allow you to say certain things. like North Korea. Now, the people who live in America have this freedom of speech. They can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want, in a sense, right? But then again, there could be consequences if it goes against the law. So we know that there's going to be limits for certain places, and we get to make a choice. Do we want to stay here or do we want to move? Because at some point, when you hit adulthood, you get to make a choice. Do you stay or do you leave? And I can't tell you how many people just stay. They stay in their city, they stay in their state, they stay in their zone, and they don't break the rules. They don't break the ceiling that was given to them at a very young age, because sky's not the limit, you are. Where's your limit? Wherever the hell you want it to be. So there's aspects to these rules that you have in your life, they should be broken, especially if these rules are not bringing about any level of abundance in your life. So there's a lot to be said about this idea of rules. It's a philosophical question. It's very provocative, where it makes you think. It allows your mind to wander, which is what we need. We need to be able to be flexible, to look at a situation and see, hey, I understand what most people might be thinking, but just because they're thinking that way doesn't mean I have to think that way. It doesn't mean I have to stay in my comfort zone, in my safe box. It doesn't mean that I always have to feel like I'm protected, right? We can be those people who break the rules. We could be the innovators. We could be the leaders. We could be the scientists that say, hey, I understand that just because someone has proven this, it doesn't mean I can disprove it, or I can find a better way for something to happen. It happens quite a bit in science. At some point, something gets disproved, and at one point, it was a rule. So just because it's a rule today doesn't mean it can't be broken. So find the rules in your life that are not rules, but rather limits. Find this idea of how breaking the rules can help you achieve more in life. Not simply to do the wrong thing, but to understand that the limit was preconceived. It's very similar to how I gave the example of you're waiting in line, and then again, you might be waiting in the wrong line. So it's these small things that might not be big at the time, but then again, in life, they can be big. They can make big changes, big mindset shifts. It begins with breaking the rules. It begins with asking yourself simple questions. Are rules meant to be followed blindly, or are rules meant to be broken?